the Economists in Government. All right, welcome dun sa ating session. This is the session, the PES session called The Economists in Government, a Conversation. And una sa lahat, gusto kong pasalamatan ng ating mga panelists for today. Ganun din doon sa mga estudyante at sa iba pang miyembro ng mga kawanian ng pareho sa gobyerno at sa mga pribadong sektor sa pagpunta, sa pag-attend sa ating session today. This promises to be a very exciting, for me at least, it's a very exciting topic because this is not something that we normally see in a PES session, because this is normally because PES sessions are very technical and people talk about their papers and talk about the research that they've done or the accomplishments that they have that they have achieved as far as their work is concerned. This time, we're going to talk about, or we're going to ask people in government, economists who have joined government, who enjoy a position of authority in government, to talk about their experience. And hopefully this is going to be insightful for everyone, especially for budding economists who aspire to be a member of, well, maybe not necessarily economics team, but a member of the technocrats in government, or just the bureaucrats. So I hope that this becomes very interesting for everyone, because these are personal insights of our panelists. It should be, I'm hoping that it would be inspiring for most. If you do have questions, please type them in, send them to, I think it's a chat, no? They can type their questions as early as now. If they already have questions, if you already have questions this early regarding our panelists or the experience of our panelists working in government, and we will address those after everyone has, or after our panelists have spoken. So let me introduce myself first, because I'm already talking and you don't know who I am. I am Professor Agustin Arsenas. I just moved to UP Los Baños. I used to be from the School of Economics in UP Diliman. I am the director of the Community Innovation Studies Center under the College of Public Affairs and Development in UP Los Baños, and I am your facilitator for today. Okay, so quickly, I will introduce to you our panelists, and then I'll ask them to talk about themselves if they don't mind. Talk a little bit about the work that they do, who they are, and also maybe get to know them a little bit personally. What they like to do when they're not being, this high power technocrats in government. Okay, so today we are honored to be we are honored to have. First is Assistant Secretary Jonathan Uy from the National Economic and Development Authority. We also have Assistant Secretary Leonel De Velez from the Department of Transportation. Excuse me. We also have Assistant Secretary Juvie Donafrata from the Department of Finance, and then Executive Director Merwin Salazar from the Senate Economic Planning Office of Senate of the Philippines. Okay, welcome to our distinguished panel, who, by the way, I must say, kasama ka na dito, Jonathan, are quite young. And I'm kasama ka na, Jonathan, kasi pag kasama ka, kasama rin ako eh. So
precisely.
Kaya this young group of economists in government that will be sharing their insights with us. So if I may ask each one of you to introduce yourself, maybe mention your position. I mean, I've already mentioned your assistant secretary, but perhaps what department or division in NEDA or Department of Transportation, Finance, or the Senate Economic Planning Office. And also, you could tell us how long you've been working for government and why are you doing this? All right, sige, let's start with Jonathan.
Hi, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. I'm Jonathan Uy. Ogie, I hope you don't mind, no? But, turning 57 this month.
Young. Sabi ko nga,
yeah.
young people in
Not far
government.
from our facilitator, because we met up when we were still in school, Econ bachelor's degree. So I graduated from School of Economics 87 with the batch ID number 83144445. Yeah, tanda ko pa. But anyway, I've been with NEDA since 1989. But before that, actually, I almost had 2 years in the Department of Budget and Management. So actually, the reason why I'm in government, this is my first job was with DBM in government. I started working before graduation. Kasi that time, for those who do not know, that was the time na the first election after the Marcos period, the first Marcos period, so to speak. So may election ban. Naipit ako tuloy na pumasok bago magkaroon ng election ban. The first election ban after the first Marcos presidency. I've been with NEDA there for about almost 33 years. Actually, I was planning to do my rounds in departments. Unfortunately, it's appointed management in NEDA in 99, so more or less nagsettle in na ako. So I've been in a management position starting as assistant director since 1999. I've been assistant secretary since 2018. So more or less, some people say I'm an institution already in NEDA. I think ASEC Leo of DOTR would probably deny that. But that being said, no, well, the reason I am in government, siguro just to stop at that point, is, well, I owe it to my being scholar ng bayan, so to speak. I felt the obligation at least to render some service to government.
Right. That's right. I think Jonathan froze. Alam mo na, welcome to the Philippines. Hello? All right. Just so I know that I'm not the one who froze, could Clarissa send me a chat message or just say hello to me?
Hi sir, nawala din po talaga si sir.
Nawala talaga si Jonathan. Anyway, itutuloy ko ng konti yung kanyang sinabi, no, kasama ko si Jonathan. And is he back?
Yeah, I'm sorry, naputol pala. Napuna ako na nag-freeze kayong lahat eh.
Ako naman, akala ko ako nag-freeze.
Anyway, yeah, that's my whole story. No, I've been here in government for 35 years. I have stayed. At the outset, it was more of a rendering an obligation as having been a scholar ng bayan in UP. And through fortunate circumstances, I have stayed, finding my niche in NEDA after all these years. Thank you. I'll stop with that.
Okay, thank you so much, Jonathan. I can relate to that part about trying to serve, kasi no, and when we, of course, kasi generation namin to ni Jonathan, no, the very young generation, na parang we owe it to the country to give something back, kasi ang mura-mura ng tuition namin. Of course, mas malala ngayon kasi libre na. Pero nung time namin mura lang.
If I can add, Ogie, we were in those exciting period from 83 to 87. Remember, in 83, Ninoy Aquino died.
Right.
In 86, we won our first basketball championship in UAE for after 29
Oo nga,
years.
I think nakakatulong yung pagkapanalo sa basketball
Oh,
kasi
yun, that was inspirational, sina Benji Paras.
oo nga.
Then more importantly, we had the change, no, from the so-called dictatorship, or
Right.
effectively the dictatorship, to the first democratic. So parang talagang nagdikit-dikit lahat yung mga obligations as UP graduates.
Oo nga, as mga members ng grupo ng Eskola ng Bayan. Thank you, Jonathan. Sige, okay. Dito naman tayo sa medyo mga legitimate na mga young ones. All right. So let's start with Leo, no? Leo De Veles from the Department of Transportation. Hello, Leo. Could you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in government.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. So my name is Leo De Veles. I'm currently Assistant Secretary for Planning and Project Development of the Department of Transportation. I've been in this position for only a month and a half. Previously, I was wearing a different hat. I was project manager of the North-South Commuter Railway project. So that was mainly in the railway sector. That was my focus for the last 6 years. But with the first couple of months, wearing a different hat now, having to take on the rest of the transportation system of our country. I have been with DOTR since December 2015. So I think this is my 7th year serving in government. I was a fresh grad actually serving in government in 2015. I got my bachelor's in international economics from the School of Foreign Service in Georgetown University. So why I decided to serve in government? Echoing Sir Jonathan, it's a genuine desire to serve the country. So I wanted to see how I could use the skills that I may have learned, or what I think I knew at the time. As a fresh grad, perhaps you think you know everything, but having served in government for these last couple of years, there's a lot more to learn. So it's been fun serving in government, and we hope to really make some big changes in our transportation system. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. And it's also it warms my heart to know that someone who finished from university abroad decided to come home. That's quite rare. Most people try to look for greener pastures abroad, and it's kind of a reverse, the opposite for you. And I'm really pleased, and I hope that you do very well, and I hope that all your projects in the Department of of Transportation work out really well, because I'll be waiting for to hear more about your work in the coming years. Thank you so much, Leo. All right. O sige, and then we have Juvie naman from the Department of Finance.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to our fellow panelists and to Sir Agustin. Thank you very much to PS for the invitation. In particular, Yusek Capuno, he was the one who invited us here. So I'm Juvie Danofrata. I'm from the Department of Finance, Assistant Secretary, under the group of Fiscal Policy and Monitoring Group. I'm one of the heads before of the tax reform during the Duterte administration. Right now, I'm also the head of the Fiscal Incentives Review Board Secretariat. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but these are if you have private investments that are applying for tax incentives in the different investment promotion agencies that includes the Board of Investment or under the DTI, then those kind of activities will go through the FIRB. So I've been in the government for 19 years. I transferred from the Philippine National Bank, PNB, to the government. Why? Medyo selfish siguro yung reason, because I heard that there are a lot at the time. I heard that there are a number of opportunities to study to a higher degree abroad. And so and I wanted to do my master's abroad. So that's one of the reasons why I entered the government. And fortunately, I was able to do that. So I went to Singapore, the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, to do my master's in public policy in NUS. And then, of course, I came back here and continue with the Department of Finance. And right now, siguro I've just finished with saying that I never really appreciated economics when I was studying. It was only when I entered the government service when I truly appreciated the value of economics. So for all of the students listening right now, you might want to try the government sector.
Juvie, economics graduate ka, also from which university naman?
From the Polytechnic University of the Philippines.
All right, that's we call it the other UP. Hindi kasi
Also a government university. So
that's
I'm
right.
also a product of of the public budget.
I said that's true. That's true. Well, it also it's good to know no, that you recognize, and also for other, especially for the students, there are opportunities in government. Especially, I to be honest, I was in a similar situation when I joined the Board of Investment. No, I was a semi-fresh grad at the time, and one of the things that when I was being interviewed, so one of the things that was being used to parang to entice us, my group of applicants, was because there are scholarships available, and that it's an opportunity that's not available to other employees in the private sector, because government has funds and has lots of tie-ups with other agencies and other funding agencies that can help support those that aspire to have a graduate degree in whatever field. So just so people know, especially for those who are thinking of, I want to go to Stanford next or somewhere, and it's very expensive. I mean, being bright isn't enough. Just so people know, being really smart isn't enough to land you in the best schools, because the best schools are also very expensive. So, okay, thank you so much, Juvie. Our last but certainly not the least panelist is from the Senate, and it's Merwin. Merwin, could you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you joined, how you came about to joining government.
Yes, thank you, sir. Agustin, thank you also. I like to also. I'm sorry. And I would also like to thank Yusek Dokoy Kapuno, my former teacher at the UP School of Economics, who invited me to this session in the 60th PES. And good morning to everyone in the room. I obtained my Bachelor of Science in Business Economics and Master's in Development Economics degrees from the UP School of Economics. After graduating from college, I first joined the private sector for a couple of years, and then I taught economics and business courses at the UP in the Visayas for 2 years, and then I went back to UP to pursue my master's degree. And it was after finishing my master's degree where I joined when I joined the government. Prior to I joined the government because I was recommended by my colleague at bank to join the Senate. One of the offices of the senators, she's Nene Guevara, former USEC of the DOF. She recommended me to one of the senator's offices who needed somebody who has the background in economics. So I was first hesitant to join the government, the Senate, because I didn't like working with the politicians. But she convinced me that the senator that I'll be working with is is very bright, and I would learn a lot from him. And I was getting a lot of email from his office telling me that I should join their office because I need to para sa bayan, kumbaga, para sa bayan lang. I need not think about the compensation. They told me that I think it's about time for me to work in government to be able to pay back, my UP education. So, so that's it. So I joined the government. I joined the office of the center for 3 years, and then I was also after 3 years I was recruited by the Senate Economic Planning Office. The head of the office then was a UP School of Economics graduate also. She recruited me to join their office, so I resigned from the center's office and moved to where I am now, the Senate Economic Planning Office. I've been in this position for 12 years now, but I've been in the Senate for 18 years already.
Wow. Talagang Leo, ikaw ang pinaka-bagets talaga dito. but
Baka si Juvie yung bata.
second placer si Juby. Okay. All right. Well, taking off from what Merwin said, no, na parang there was some sort of a little bit of trepidation about joining government. But did you think that when you first joined government, when you first joined, your agency, did you think that you were prepared? Did you think that your background as in economics, as an economics major, as an economics graduate, did you think that was enough, or what were your fears? No, did you think you were prepared? Sige, we can start with Merwin kasi siya yung last. Pabalik naman tayo.
Okay, sir. I think I was thankful. By the way, I'd like to thank also Yusik Doke for recommending me to the World Bank. So my background, my experience with the World Bank prepared me a lot to do the task in the Senate. So my job in the Senate, first in the senator's office, was to prepare for policy briefs on a variety of issues, from economic to, I think, almost everything that the Senate would tackle. So my principal would join every committee hearing then, and then so I was compelled to prepare a brief for him. And I think my economics background was adequate enough, somewhat adequate enough to perform the task assigned to me at the center's office, particularly in the areas of fiscal and other sectors, for example, education, health, and other areas. And there are, when you are into policy research, when you have that experience, you have a lot of sources to go to if you need, if you're preparing a policy, a briefer for a senator or a legislator for that matter. You have a lot of sources here in the Philippines and abroad. So it was quite handy for me to do the task. But of course, the quantity of work at that time, that was, I think, the major hurdle for me, because we were only 3 in the unit that I was handling, and the senator would join every hearing, and there were so many things to do, and I think that was the challenge for me.
So the challenge wasn't that you were that your economics background was, you thought was prepared. It was just the volume of work that was unexpected. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
How about Juvi? Anong man experience mo? Did you think that you were that your background in economics or as an economics major was that adequate, or for the job that you were going to do, at least when you first joined government up to now?
So was I prepared? No, I wasn't. I came from the banking sector. I made use of my accounting 1 and 2. It's all about debit credit. I was in operations and investment. So it was all about balancing figures and debit credit. I suppose it was one of the reasons also why ultimately I resigned and went to the government sector, because I wanted to somehow make use of some of the things that I learned when I was studying economics. And when I entered the Department of Finance, and I was into the group that's doing the tax policies, you have a sense that you would understand, but practically speaking, when you were, I'm not sure now about the curriculum in economics, no? Pero when it was my time, taxation was not the focus of economics. Okay. So it was only when I entered the DOF that I have gained all of the understanding and information and knowledge that I know. And economics actually complemented that. And that's a very good plus point if you're an economics graduate and you're joining the government sector. I think any government agencies, it's really very important and significant that you have an economics background. It will make your life easier in doing your work, no? So
Familiarity.
you may be partially prepared, but you can never really be prepared, especially if you're doing practical work already and policy work also.
Right. I can see that. No, kasi yung a lot of times also students think that once they get out of school that they are now ready to tackle everything in the world, and only to find out very brutally that reality is a different thing. But it's good to know that for those that are listening, that you will be trained. Don't be scared. No, all right. You may not have all the the best the preparation, the complete preparation, but once you start working, you will get that training. And it's good to know also from Juby that being an economics major, I guess, helped you at least assisted you to at least be familiar with the terms. Kasi sa akin, parang at least naintindihan ko what tax is. Parang at least alam ko what an incentive is. No? Kasi those were things that were talked about in class, not necessarily the theories themselves. Okay, how about si Leo, ang ating bunso?
Good morning, everyone. Again, on the question on how prepared has an economics degree made me for siguro the real world. If I were to measure it quantitatively, siguro 25%. 75% of the things we learn, yung mga models, yung mga graphs, everything like that, those all assume that we work in a very rational world. Everything is an ideal situation. But when you enter the real world, when you enter public service, you realize agad na not everyone is a rational actor. The models that we have learned in university throughout the degree may not function perfectly in the real world. But yung 25% siguro na was really helpful are the basic core principles that we learn and is ingrained in economics thinking. How to deal with the concepts of how to deal with market failure. Competition is good. There's no free lunch. There's always a cost to something. Like in transportation, for example, diba, we have libreng sakay. Everyone likes libreng sakay, but someone has to pay for that at the end of the day. Then we can get into discussions. It's really a philosophical thing that you want to get from the degree of economics. Are we more supply side, demand side? Sometimes we're also more practical. I guess also when you enter government, you become a bit more pragmatic in terms of understanding what can we really implement, what works. Because yung nasa-shatter siguro when you enter the real world when it comes to implementing or practicing economics is we have to adjust, or we have to understand that the real world is not perfect. There's so many constraints, so many challenges, but I guess our job, the reason why we're here is to figure out solutions to that. And the basic principles that we learn, such as there's no free lunch, we have to think there's always a cost to something. How do we improve competition? How do we address market failure, whether it's addressing failure of the private sector to provide infrastructure, public services? Those are the kinds of things we learn along the way, and your mentors will train you on in public service.
Thank you. Like one thing that struck me was the point that you made about, we're taught rationality as an assumption in economics, and then you find out in the real world that rationality does not always exist. But and yet, throughout your training as an economist or as a budding economist, one of the basic assumptions is that we assume that agents are rational, and then it turns out, or at least they have a different definition of rationality, something that we're not familiar with. And so you learn, and I guess that's a practical side of being in government, or once you leave the university, you find out that all the theories, that all the things that we've learned are essentially ideal things, but at least you get to know what the ideal things are, the ideal world is, and then so that you can compare that with the not so ideal world, and so that I guess that gives you at least a point of reference, diba? So
And
okay, thank you.
I think,
Yeah,
sir, we at least strive for the ideal, di ba?
exactly. Also something that, diba, parang alam natin this is the ideal, so let's try and work towards that. Doesn't always happen, but at least we know what we're aiming for, diba? All right, thanks, Leo. How about you, Jonathan? Ang aking kabatch. Okay.
Actually, I would like to probably echo yung sinabi ni Leo, no? But in the context na having had economics as a bachelor's degree really provide me the tools, to appreciate, understand, and even the analytics, the tools, statistics, economic thought, economic behavior, even to a certain extent yung mga institutional dynamics, particularly if you work in government, being an economist, having an economics background provides you the tools. That's one thing I have to say. Now, really, the other thing I'd like to echo from Leo, and I think Jovi and Mervin also more or less alluded to it, talagang yung shock na lumilitaw na what you learn in economics are not really directly applicable, no? You have to be able to pick out the, kumbaga, the, so to speak, weak assumptions, no, or weak premises in what you learn in economics in the real world. I suppose in government, it's really something that you test. Talagang economics provides you. That's the third point and final point I'd like to say, no? Economics, for me, the way I've learned it as an undergrad, provided a lot of avenues, no? Appreciation of economics in mass psychology, in law, in politics, political economy. Kaya nga, I really exhort the students here, no, na you make most of the time to look at economics as a gateway.
Right.
Point of fact, I have an anecdote there. Yung sekdo ko, hindi pala pinapasalamatan kasi actually I'm here because on his instruction. He's my boss. But anyway, my anecdote to give this is immediately after graduation, my then boss, then Undersecretary Benjok, now the Secretary of Finance, put me together with under former DBM Secretary Bert Romulo when he got elected as senator into drafting legislation for Senator Romulo to push. And at that point, early in that point, I already saw different perspectives, particularly from yung legal appreciation, mga lawyers sa kausap ko. And economics gave me a very good, my background in economics gave me a very good tool and even, I would say, weapon to, to argue what they would propose and provide them an appreciation of what they're trying to propose in the context of economic analysis, particularly in the context of welfare economics. So my background in economics and my work in government has been a perfect marriage, so to speak. So I really encourage the budding economists here who want to continue into the discipline to consider working in government. As I think Juvie and Mervin has found out, no? I suppose. And Leo is now still learning, being the youngest, but he's engaging with me, so I suppose he appreciates where I'm coming from. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to no, siguro take up from that. No? Economics teaches us how to think in a different way. The discipline, as an economist, we think differently from a psychologist or from from a sociologist, and I think that's something that also from all the things, all that this discussion is pointing towards. I think is one of the main points is that we with an economics background, we think in a certain way. Sabi nga ni Leo kanina, di ba, rationality, and then you find out it's not always practiced, but nevertheless we think that way, and that's also how we think, how we reason. So when we approach a problem, an economist or a person with an economics background might approach a problem differently from someone who has a psychology background. So to think like an economist is essentially what we bring to the table when we join government. Thank you so much. All right. Siguro, this might be a good time to ask also, do you think that you need a graduate degree? Kasi parang to work in government also sometimes it necessitates, or we're asked to pursue graduate degrees. But from your personal point of view, is it really needed other than from promotion? Kasi alam ko na hindi mo po promote yung iba kapag walang di ba, masters or something. But from from your experience or from what you can see at this point, do you think it's needed, or is the job enough? Is the training on the job enough for the things or for the tasks that you're up against? Pasahan naman natin kay Juvie ngayon. You think kailangan ng graduate degree, other than for promotion? Yun lang talagang for training. Is it necessary?
Yes, I'm glad I did a higher degree learning, and because I took up my MA abroad, the experience is more than enough, Really, the learning the basics, done na yan done it in your school when you were doing college, and we have very good universities naman here in the Philippines, which would really give you a very good foundation, so that when I went abroad to study in a university, and we are in a class, we are 46 countries represented. Ganon kadami, ganon ka-diverse yung aming klase at that time. So having to deal with different students, and these are also, some of them would come from their own governments as well, would give you a particular kind of learning and knowledge that you will not learn just by your own experience alone at work. And those things that you've learned from these other nationalities, from the experiences of other people, that's actually what you bring back when you go back to your own country, and you try also to do your work or function in the government, and take all of those best practices and try to see whether it will work here or not, or try to modify, depende. So it will not hurt. In fact, that's one of my internal policies to my staff. For every year, one of you should get a master's degree. It's very hard to lose a staff kasi medyo even temporarily, but for them, I think it will not just benefit them, but also the organization. So I really highly encourage them to take up a master's degree. Yun. I think that's something that you should pursue.
Right. So other than the training, also it's the interaction, especially if you're interacting with people from different fields, or from different countries. I think that's a very valid point to make about pursuing a master's degree. It's not just about the theories you learn, but also about the ideas, the exchange of ideas that you'll have a chance to do. Okay, how about C. Merwin? What do you think? Is it necessary for the line of work that you do for the Senate?
Yes. I forgot to mention earlier that I realized when I joined the Senate that I needed more exposure on using econometrics and other statistical tools to incorporate this into the research that we were doing. And but the training I obtained from the university on econometrics and quantitative analysis somehow helped me understand and do the work that was necessary for the legislator. But I would say it wasn't enough. So I would recommend. So we needed further training. So we had further training in statistical tools with the government research centers and outside of the government, private providers for training providers, and I and also yeah, I think you needed a master's degree to be able to widen your horizon. The undergraduate degree is not enough for sure. You needed an experience, plus you needed also to go back to school for retooling. And, you need to go to undergo further education and training for retooling purposes. And then so I think yeah, it's necessary because we have staff who are undergraduate degrees, and there are differences in skills, the undergrads and those who obtained master's degree and even further training, postgraduate degree. I even had to take special courses in economics in outside of the country, and special courses, for example, on evaluation, which is not being thoroughly taught in the university. The evaluation tools are not being taught in the university, so I had to learn it from outside. So I think yeah, I would encourage really those who are taking economics degrees courses right now to enhance their knowledge by taking a
Masters.
graduate degrees. Yes, masters.
I like the word that you use, the retooling. Because once you're working and you're performing your duties and so on, you'll find out that there are certain things that you need to certain skills that may not have been taught to you that you need to acquire now. So you go back to graduate school, not just so that you can get promoted, but really concentrate on the part about being retooled, about learning new things that you did not know before, but you have a better perspective now because you have experience, on the ground, and so you know what you need. So you're going to be more, aware of what classes or what research work that you'd like to do in order to acquire the skills and all those skills and training that you need. See, Leo, I'm not sure. Leo, do you have do you think you need to go to graduate school for the work that you do?
I guess there is the question for a master's in economics
Um,
or
I would
or in
say not
general.
necessary.
Yeah.
Kasi masyado namang kasi taking off from what Merwin said, no, parang retooling. What if it's not economics, it's not econometrics that you need? Nagkataon lang kasi sa kanya it's econometrics.
Yes.
But what about you? Is there do you need a master's degree or a graduate degree to do your job better?
I would say yes. So I've been thinking about doing masters in urban planning. So undergraduate in economics, but where I've seen where I may need some retooling would be on the urban planning side, especially since working in the sector in particular. Sometimes I realize now maybe I need more information, or I need more education in specific areas. So, but I think, sir, my 2 cents would be, don't go straight into masters after bachelor's degree. Get some real world practical experience in applying economics, seeing how it really is in practice. Then perhaps you might also find your specialization. I mean, public health, there are people who like to get into public health. They might start on economics, but they see the public health system or improving the public health education, even more specialized economics, such as competition, regulation, those kinds of things. So I think that would be my 2 cents, would be perhaps to serve first before undertaking the masters.
Okay, thank you. I think you're right. I think that first and foremost, you need to have experience because you won't know what you really need unless you've gone through the grind of things and know that, okay, these are the things that I'm lacking. So that when you decide to pursue or to undergo the retooling phase, you know what you need. So I guess as an unsolicited advice to students or those who are about to join the workforce, you think about gaining experience first. All right. So okay, how about you, Jonathan?
Actually, I'm okay echoing practically all the points raised
Everything.
by Jovi, by Mervin, and Leo. No, first, siguro I'll start with Leo. You really need to discern where you want to go, and a master's will provide you the additional tools, as Mervin has pointed out. No, and then when you get into it in the master's program, as Jovi has pointed, you have opportunity to engage, no, in academic. An academic environment with other professionals, to see exactly. Siguro I don't know whether I should attribute this, but now Governor Philip Medalla, or was it the late Professor Ruping Aloso, who told me in a class before na in a bachelor's degree you begin to understand. In a master's degree you begin to discern or criticize. And then in PhD, doctorate, you begin to create. I really believe in that. No, I mean, I've seen it in action. Lumalabas talaga. So for those students here, I encourage you to follow what has been said here, that you need to really have an application first, the time to see whether the bachelor's degree, no, you took is the thing that you want to to apply yourself in your productive life. And then and brush up. In other words, you may not have to follow economics. If you're an economics major, you can look into another specialization. Particularly when you've discerned where you want to go. In fact, there's a question here how economists can help the poorest children. You may not have to go through a master's degree in economics in order to specialize into that. No, can go to, let's say, education, or I don't know. I haven't really, it's not really my field, no. But then when you get into it, you get to listen to other people and find out exactly how things work in the real world even more, because you're in an academic environment, to test your ideas and hear other people's ideas. In my work, I have to say that in government, siguro what can I say? Actually, my master's degree was more for promotion. I have to be very frank. I was forced to go to study because I was told that I cannot be promoted, and they wanted to promote me, and I need to take my master's. But be that as it may, the thing that I want to say as a last point, learning really is a continuing basis. Even up to now, I'm still learning. In fact, the whole point really at the end of the day, masters provide you another level of attainment, educational attainment, but the learning has to continue. It's not going to end. And the good thing about it is that with a master's degree, you really have more appreciation, more discernment, and you can critique. Actually, that's what you want to learn very much in a master's degree, to see what theories, what methodologies, what things really happen in the real world. It's a better way of appreciating it.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I guess the takeaway is that when you do a master's, and you may need it for promotion, especially in government, kasi I think government is more sophisticated now than before. So in terms of the labor force that it absorbs. Kasi so parang diba, it's a requirement now for promotion. But siguro we can appeal to the young generation, and well, young pa naman tayo anyway. Our co-young generation members, na when you do think about graduate school, whether it's a need or something that's you think that you need, think about also how it's going to apply to your work. Katulad nga ng sinabi ni Jonathan, if it turns out you don't really need a master's to help the poor, but at least you'll be able to identify how other avenues or other opportunities to help them. Now, merong interesting question dito from the audience, which I found a little a little, I guess, intriguing. No? So who's harder to convince, politicians or fellow economists? And what do you do if you can't convince them? Ikaw, Leo, ano experience mo? Who is harder to convince? Siyempre, do you have a certain way of thinking? Rationality nga yung ating ang take-off point natin. And then you encounter, I guess, you can't be helped. You're in government. You may have to convince politicians or fellow economists. But question dito is, who's harder to convince when for the work that you do? Leo, what do you think? Who's
I guess it's hard to convince politicians with economically rational answers. Then opposite, it's harder to convince our fellow civil servants about political what is politically rational, what makes sense rationally to politicians does not make sense economically to the civil service. So it's both ways. I guess one of the things I've learned also in the last in my time here is politicians are also our decision makers, our elected leaders are also rational thinkers. But as mentioned, the definition of rationality is somewhat different. Frankly, the rationality is how do I get reelected? That's be very frank. That's one of the key things. The political economy, that's one of the things you will understand more in the work. Is the politics and economics are tied together. The political economy of decision making, of proposing solutions. We can't plan in a vacuum. We can't plan without understanding the political implications. There will always be winners and losers. So I guess our work is making everyone understand and giving everyone the best information possible in who will be the winners and losers of a particular policy, of a particular law, a particular decision. So what's the saying? A compromise. We're in a democracy. The best compromise is when everyone is unhappy. So what makes sense politically does not always make sense economically. But that is exactly what we're trying to do here, is figuring out what the elected leaders who represent the public are prioritizing. So
Right.
it's hard to convince one or the other depending on the situation.
I can see that, and I imagine the challenge of trying to convince, because we have a certain perspective on what rationality is, but these, as you said, the politicians operate on or they start out with iba yung kanilang objective function. Kasi the objective function is maximize welfare. Kaya lang, welfare is, it can be defined in different ways. And so if the politician is trying to maximize his or her welfare, it's different from maximizing the welfare of the public. Right? How about tanong natin yung taga-Senate. Sige, si Merwin, mahirap po mag-convince ng politicians?
It's not really convincing, because I think you can actually simplify the results of your study so that legislators who are non-economists would understand. But I think the challenge is convincing them to decide based on the results of your study, not based on other things. I think that's the challenge, because there are, as what Lei has said, there are different varied interests, in a particular issue. So many stakeholders, trying to lobby with the legislators. So sometimes the legislator would tell you he understands and he appreciates and he would take into consideration the results of the study. But at the end of the day, when you see the decision being legislators, what was the basis for such decision. It was not entirely on your study, but it was, your study was just taken into consideration, but the primary reason for the decision was, based on the lobby of other interests. So that's the challenge in government. But, we shouldn't be disappointed. We've told, our colleagues in the office that we shouldn't be disappointed. This is how it works, but we should push, really push harder. Maybe we could push harder, and maybe I don't know, influence the legislators to think the right way, to decide on the right on for the purpose, not on based on other interests, particularly, for example, the business sector and politicians.
Right. I can imagine that it's also, it could be frustrating because our work as economists is really to come up with the different options, and then we lay it out for the for the decision makers who are the politicians and the policy managers to say, okay, these I guess it can be frustrating when they choose the one that's not, from the efficiency point of view, the best one. So I guess ang question ko na, and I'll address this to Juvie naman. How do you handle, I mean, personally, if you think na, hindi, wag yan ang piliin nyo, ang piliin yung policy option is this one. What do you do? How do you handle that kind of situation? Do you push, or do you just, pray? I don't know. What do you do? How do you handle it? Sige, Juvie, what do you do pagka ganun yung sitwasyon naman?
You cry. Hindi. On the
Naniniwala
side.
ako
After the
dyan.
hearing, you go to the side of the room and then you cry your heart out. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, 18 years I've been dealing with politicians and legislators and policymakers ever since I stepped inside the building of the DOF. It's really difficult. So I agree with what Leo and Merwin said, no? It's harder. Actually, you have very good questions coming in here, and they're all very related, no, to this one as well. It's harder to convince politicians or legislators because of the different interests and mandates as well, no? Iba yung mandato nila sa publiko, iba yung mandato namin sa mga ahensya. So because of that, the interest also varies, and there are different ways of doing it. Of course, the most or the more painful way is what the executive would sometimes propose, and that can be also, as what you said, frustrating for us because sila yung legislator no, we're just the ones who are advising, recommending them to them. Kapag hindi mo sila ma-convince, number one, that's where economics comes in. Again, based on experience, we were able to, tax policies are the hardest to get through Congress. Lalahatin ko na ng policies because taxation is very difficult. No? Sometimes when we go to a legislative liaison meeting, they would say, the other liaison would say, oh, we passed this, we're able to push for this. And I said, sige, palit na lang tayo kasi ang hirap ng tax i-push, no? Pero kasi the way you do it is that you argue on the basis of empirical evidence and practical studies, no? Something that they would understand. Sabi nga ni Mary, when you bring it down, economics, you bring it down to the level where everyone can understand. You cannot use very highfalutin economic terms or you have a graph and then you explain it to the legislators. Hindi, that will not work, believe me. So as early as now, if you're a student, you get all of these theories and frameworks and principles, textbook principles. You try to break it down to a more practical level because economics is practical. And everyone experiences it. No? Nasa bahay ka, alam mo yung economics, alam mo yung supply and demand, hindi mo kailangang explain sa klase yan. So you bring it down to the level where your audience can understand, your stakeholders can understand what you're saying, and try to emphasize to them the benefits to them of what you're pushing for. Kasi pag nakita nila na ito yung makabubuti para sa marami, for the majority, most of the work is done for you. Again, argue on the basis of evidence, on the basis of very good data, on the basis of very good studies, and also it would not hurt if you also get help from other scholars or from other organizations, especially international organizations, who can also justify, no, or put more justification into what you're pushing for.
Right. Thank you. That's very insightful. No? So for those who may have, a little bit of doubt about whether government or politicians listen, ang suggestion, and from what I've gathered from Juvie, is do your homework. Be as if 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 your work indicates how much gain can be achieved from a project, maybe the politician will also see it as a gain for them. So I guess yung ano doon is ang take home natin doon ay packaging, packaging ng ating mga output. And as Juvie had said, don't try to be technical kasi baka lalong hindi maintindihan, baka lalong ma-reject yan. So mas mabuti pang to be as simple as possible. I'm curious, si Leo kaya, nagkaroon ka na ba ng experience na how do you handle yung frustration, o nagkaroon ka na ba ng experience ng frustration na parang ito na talaga, ito na dapat, but no, hindi yung course of action na kinuha.
I'll give an example from my previous role as project manager. We're building kasi the railway from Manila to Clark, Pampanga, and every barangay wants a station, a railway station, and we're like, sir, hindi yata natin kaya yon. Parang we'll get to Clark, but it'll take us 2 days if we have to stop at every barangay along the way. I think there's like 100 barangays from Manila to Clark International Airport, and hindi talaga kaya. And so we present the numbers as Ma'am Juvie mentioned. We show what the travel time is, what the speed, what the benefits to the riding public. We will just have hubs and major terminals so people can go there. And that will be so we try to provide alternative solutions, Ren, to manage the expectations also of that.
So trying to meet them halfway would be your suggestion. Yung trying to, I guess, from somehow tell them, wag na pong 100 barangays, 50 barangays na lang. Baka naman, at least it's, you really just wanted like 4 barangays, but they wanted 100. So somewhere in between would be the option. I think that's a good strategy.
One of the things we also do is we say now we can always build additional stations in the future. So for now, we need to build a project, and perhaps this is what is currently economically viable. So we only build, say, 10 stations, but we provide in the designs and practically that we will build future stations in their local government unit,
Right.
for example.
Very smart. I like that. No, para bang hindi ngayon, bukas. kung hindi po natin gagawin this time around, next time. Then maybe next time hindi na siya elected. So hindi na mangyayari. I'm kidding, of course. But wise one. Wise Jonathan. How do you deal with I guess disappointments when it comes to pushing for projects that you think are what would make sense, but politicians don't like them?
Actually, it's interesting. I've had both in my bachelor's degree in UP and even my master's degree in another country. Talagang we applied this question of policy making in economic. Ang bottom line, first I'd like to say to everybody, at the end of the day, whether the system is perfect or not, the politicians are the elected representatives of the people. No, they speak for the people. So unless we change our way of electing them or changing these elected people, just have to follow that they are policymakers. At the end of the day, then, as economists, particularly in our case in NEDA, then this has already been said by all the other panelists, what we do is present options in a way that they would appreciate the implications of their preferences.
Right.
That's the bottom line. Ganun lang naman kasimple. Kaya nga, by the way, shout out to Ma'am Ofi Temblo, one of my former bosses here in NEDA, who has been engaging in the QC of Dr. Ofi Temblo. She's engaging in the Q&A, and she's been asking these questions. At the end of the day, it's really the the evidence-based analysis, no, that you show. But then when you talk about policy making, the point that Leo and even Juvie has mentioned, and Merwin has in effect alluded to, the end of the day, nothing is impossible. It's a question of, kumbaga, presenting when will it be right, what they want to happen, that you then tell them, then we will go to that point when we reach this certain condition. Ganun lang kasimple. So, still, for me, basic economics, the way we do it, you know, really, analytics, evidence, and the robustness of our of the results, no?
Right.
And more importantly, how the real data is coming out, whether our models, our forecasts track the are actually tracking the actual. And that's actually where the policy making, na yung sabi ni Juby, yung tax policy, no? That's a classic example. We come up with tax laws and then we find out that it's not actually attaining and there are even unintended consequences. We present it. Then we correct we come up with policy reform. To me, I have to say my long years in NEDA has put me in that perspective that I am willing to take on anybody's perspective, but let us agree on, based on an agreed framework, what results we really want to happen. And then the most important thing I have to tell for those who are working in government, let's present recommendations, robust recommendations. It's always important, no, to policymakers. And if they don't listen, well, hindi na ako iiyak. Sorry, Asek Jovi, no, na ang dami ko naling realization. We'll just say, well, it's not right. Probably next time. Better time next, better luck next time. Thank you. That's all I can say at this point.
You sound so wise. Parang si Yoda of government service. Parang
Akala ko sasabihin mo Jabba dati. Anyway. Mga Star Wars generation. Anyway.
Oo nga, ka naman hindi nakilala ng young generation ang Star Wars. Anyway, but I think you're right. I guess it comes with I guess age also, no, because you're not as affected as much. You learn so if you become frustrated, it's okay. I mean, for now, because it's probably the first time that you're experiencing this. But for someone like Jonathan, who's like experienced this day in, day out, no, parang it's just, it's just something, just another day at work. And you learn to, I guess you learn to accept it and deal with it and move forward. So hopefully wala namang ma-discourage. Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to add another point. No, siguro, here in NEDA, there will be changes in administration. I think it was also both of you who mentioned that. No, the important thing as in NEDA, as economists, is able to, first and foremost, decisions that are made in the past, we show why it was made, how it was made, how good it was at that time. But then if it's questioned later on by the new policymakers, this is not good, di ba? You can say, you can have the analytics and the data to show the evaluation na it was good for a while, but then probably you're right, we may have to change again.
Right.
In other words, to me, it's a continuing discipline. Like as I said, you have to take it beyond bachelor's degree, beyond master's, and even beyond the PhD, may mga postgrad pa eh. It's a continuing learning and reapplication process. Kaya nga, I'll be frank siguro to end this point. I hope to be able to, even if I retire from NEDA when I reach retirement age, I still would like to see myself applying, what I've learned, hopefully. I cannot see, it's very difficult for me to see as a public servant and as an economist, a practicing economics discipline person, to see myself in another situation unless, I find something better to do. But anyway, you can always see yourself apply. I mean, you can always apply yourself in what you read and what you see. Always. Thank you.
I think it's important to be aware of what you're learning, Para at the end of the day, when you're out of government or not working or you retired, these are the things that you take with you. the experience, the wisdom, no, the knowledge and all. I guess ang ano ko naman maididikit ko doon sa conversation or doon sa discussion is that I guess we should learn. It's not just for government agencies, but even my work as a professor. You really have to distance yourself from the decisions of those that are in position to make the decisions. You can only offer options, with the work that you do. You show the logic and the options, and then you pray. If you pray that they see the light. If they don't, at tulad ng sinabi ni Juvie, you accept it either by crying and then and then you stop, or you simply learn not to cry and just eat cake or ice cream, and then you move forward. Taking off also from the point, the one that Jonathan said about changing administration, do you find it difficult, or how do you adjust when there's a new administration? Kasi does it affect your work or hindi naman? Kapag nagkaroon ng bagong head of the agency, and also maybe medyo hindi naman sensitive, pero could you tell me if there's an administration that's easier to work with than others, or pare-pareho lang sila? And then you don't have to mention kung anong administration. Just indicate that there are other administrations that are easier to work with. When I say administration, meaning the head of the agency, So do you find it difficult to work with with a new administrator, or hindi naman? Maybe we can begin with sino ba mabilis magpalit ng administration? I guess a Senate. So umpisahan natin kay Merwin.
Yes, I think it's a reality that young economists or even students who are here today should understand that nangyayari talaga itong to change yung heads of agencies, and our leaders change. Yes, that's right. There are leaders or heads of agencies who are difficult to work with, and there are those who wouldn't, appreciate, you giving them an analysis, economic analysis of an issue. I think that the challenge is how to really present your analysis in a way that it would make them understand the issue itself, and make them realize that what they are supposed to, the decision that they're supposed to do is for the people and not for themselves. So yun yung challenge lagi. So we always think when we do present an analysis to them, laging tinitingnan namin ano yung bottom line sa tao, because it's the people who voted for them in office. So parang pinapakonsensya namin na ito yung mangyayari sa general public if this is the decision that you will take. If pag ganito naman itong mangyayari. So laging ganun yung ginagawa namin, bottom line. So and then do it in a very simple way para maintindihan nila. Kahit ayaw nila, pag pinupush mo sa kanilang ganun, somehow dumidikit sa utak nila yung ganun. And they somehow imbibe it in the way they talk and their decision making. Na ginagamit na rin nila yun. So yung question in how do we deal with changing administrations, I think ang kailangan laging intact your analysis, the database that you have in office, yung paper trail laging nandoon yun, para by the time that they would ask you have something to present to them na ito yung ginawa nyo at ito yung decision na ginawa before, as what has been said by ASEC Jonathan. Dapat dapat intact yung lagi yung record mo para may baba i-present mo sa kanila. Hindi pag hindi na yun, they would understand, and it would make them realize na kung ano yung mga decisions in the past should be respected and be honored. Kasi kung babaguhin nila yon, I'm sure there is always an opportunity para mabago yun, kasi nag-change ka the times change, and the situation would change, the environment would change, and sometimes it would call for amendments to the policy. So kung kailangan ng ganun, at least intact yung record mo, and then that would support kung anong amendment doon sa policy.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. How about si Juvias may alluded to this earlier na pa, 'di ba, minsan may mga changes sa administration kasi matagal na siya sa DOF. How do you Juvie, how do you or do you think that it's that there's certain administrations that are more difficult to convince than others, and how do you handle the changing or the changes in administration, or hindi naman siya problem?
How do you deal? I will answer that in one of the most famous answers if you're an economic graduate. It depends. It depends on the incoming administration. There are leaders that are more receptive. And if they are, you seize the opportunity. And then that's where Merwin's wisdom comes in, or suggestion, no? You make sure that you are prepared. If you have a proposal, a public policy proposal, make sure that you have prepared everything. If you were part of the past administration and you were part of a team that actually pushed for a certain legislation, you make sure that all of your data and all of your justifications before evidences were still intact, and you will be able to present that so that the incoming administration would be able to understand bakit nagkaganito to. Bakit ganito yung policy? Bakit ganito yung naisip ninyo? No? So you'd be able to answer that readily. There are administrations that are not so receptive. Yung tipong meron silang sariling pananaw, meron silang sariling direksyon, meron silang gustong gawin, and they will not really seek whatever was done in the past. So they would not ask kung ano ba kung bakit ganito yon, what was the wisdom behind. And in that case, you still have to be prepared, because whatever your boss says and whatever the leader would tell you to do, because he's the boss, he's the captain of the ship, you have to see the good in whatever was the policy that's being proposed, no? And then work on it. Yung mga pinag-usapan natin kanina, due diligence, you have to do that. And again, that's where evidence-based studies would come in. And that's where it would be very handy to put all of your economic theories and principles in a more practical sense, using the data that you have right now.
I see. So, ang reality is that there are some administrations that are easier to work with than others, but but you seize the opportunity if you sense that administration is more receptive to change. But the important thing is still to do your homework, to make sure that the work that you do is is solid, and that the options that you're presenting, to whether it's a new administration or the old administration, that these options are sound. And at the end of the day, I guess hindi natin maiiwasan talaga na some of the options that we present to our bosses, they may be they may be the best from the economics point of view, but they may not necessarily be the ones that are chosen. We have very few minutes left, and there's so many questions that have been sent, and I'm debating what's the next question to ask you. Kaya lang siguro dahil nga kakaunti na lang ang panahon, ito na lang siguro, and then kung may time pa, I'll try to address the others. Pero what do you think are the highs and lows of working in government, and what can you what can you advise those that are thinking, especially the students and those that are thinking, not necessarily just the students, but those who are deciding whether to join government or not? What is the best thing about working in government, and what is the most challenging thing about working in government? And I guess when you mention the challenging thing, what advice would you share how to deal with these challenges? Umpisa natin sa kay Master Yoda, kay Jonathan. What's the best thing about working in government, and what is the most challenging thing about working in government?
Well, I don't know about the lows, no? when I look up back in my more than almost 35 years in government, lows are a matter of expectations. So the one thing I want to say about it is always level your expectations. All of us have high expectations, especially when we graduate from college, from our bachelor degrees. But then when you come to the real world, you find out where you are in the kumbaga in society. So you have to adjust. And then you always have to adjust
Right.
wherever you go. So that's on the lows. I'm saying that on hindsight, the lows were basically when at times I expected too much. Kaya nga, ako
Don't
ang
expect
aking
too much.
ang philosophy ko lagi dyan is hope for the best, expect the worst. But anyway, but regarding the highs, the best thing working in government, I'll put it in a very negative context. I'm not working for a particular family. I'm not working for a particular set of shareholders. I'm working for the people. Now you might say which people. That's actually also correct. No, at the end of the day. But then that's the whole point. That's the whole point of democracy. I mean, working in government, we serve most of the people, I hope. And one thing, I have to say, I have been fortunate. I have been myself a project manager, and I've seen the benefits, even the things I've worked in government to the direct beneficiaries. Like when I handled the commodities project with the Japanese government grant to the Philippines, I was able to see exactly how my work in government benefited farmers, and the like. And then at the policy level where I am right now, I can see where exactly, the projects, the programs and projects that we review and are successful in terms of the approval, and we're monitoring in terms of how it's being implemented and correcting it along the way. And Leo would know that very much. Yung sinabi niya mismo, no? We engage with the stakeholders, and I really see how important our work in NEDA and together with the rest of the government agencies mean to our people. No? So this is what government work is all about. It's, kumbaga, as I was told, remember by, I don't know whether it was the late former professor and secretary Don Padaranga, the psychic income is much more than the material income. When you really look up, when you really think about it, yun yung it's the satisfaction that beyond the pesos that you earn, which is not that much. But now I think we're very competitive here in government. I am told pa nga the entry sa salary is much higher than the private sector, although it takes longer for us to increase our incomes over time. But be that as it may, the whole point is actually when we see our work in government matter to the people, it really nakakataba ng puso. Actually, it's not just service to the people, but service to the country, service to your God. I mean, the higher level, the higher things. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope that the students here really consider working government, not just government, no, public service.
Probably, that's
Whether
true.
in civil society or in the public sector, really.
As long as we serve. All right. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
we serve. Thank you.
Thank you. See, Leo hasn't been in government for long, but so far, what has been the high of working for government, and what has been like the low or the challenge, and how have you dealt with it?
I actually experienced a very low point a couple of weeks ago. As you know, we're currently crafting the Philippine Development Plan 2023-2028. And 3 weeks ago, there was a conference where all the different chapters of the PDP were being discussed at dito lang sa Pasig. And I attended the entire day, and I was like, ang daming problema that we have to tackle. It's like, and because ako, like the last 6 years, I have just been tackling the problems when it comes to the railway sector, now figuring out the transportation system, but seeing all the challenges with our healthcare system, our education system, even national identity, gender equality, I suddenly felt overwhelmed and like ang daming problems. Like how do we even begin to try and solve all these things. So I was like, oh, it was a very sobering conference. So that was a low point. Just trying to figure out how where do we begin. I guess how I was like, okay, maybe. And actually, the great thing about that is seeing that there were also a lot of dedicated people themselves trying to figure out how to do these things. So my takeaway from that is, again, I'll chip away at the infrastructure side of things, the transportation side of things. I'll dedicate my effort and time here, and I trust that my fellow public servants are doing the best that they can as well with other sectors, socioeconomic sectors. As for the highs, having come from project management previously, it's very rewarding to see some of the projects that we work with ANEDA to get approved finally happening on the ground, whether that be the North-South Commuter Railway, which is under construction. So being able to go on site and see the concrete being poured, the columns being put up, the trains being delivered here, and also even the MRT3, that was a big issue that we hope is slowly being resolved. We are now seeing some of the fruits of that effort by many government agencies. And those are usual highs when I ride the MRT. It's like, oh, I was part of this. I'm helping. I'm seeing the fruits of my labor, helping not only myself, but also really serving the public. So that's always a high point when you see your projects really making a difference.
Right. So it's making a difference. To know that you made a difference and to see that the things that you've worked for actually see the light and that they are making a difference. I guess yun yung high, no? I guess so far from Jonathan and Leo, the high would be, you're making a difference, and some work could be overwhelming, and you wonder, will I finish everything on time? All right, how about si Merwin? Ano naman ang masasabi mo about the high, or the best thing about working in government, and also the challenging part?
Yes, I have encountered a lot of lows working in the Senate.
And you're still there. I'm so impressed.
Yes, yes. Kailangan hindi tayo mag-give up, because if we give up, sino ang tatayo para sa mga taong nangangailangan? We have to be there. And yung mga example, a concrete example ng lows is, I will cite na syntax test, for example. I'm very passionate about syntax. Gusto natin mataas ang tax rate para ma-curtail yung demand or consumption for those people who can't afford when health problems come in because of consumer products. So gusto natin ganito kataas. Agreed. You discussed with the legislator, ito dapat ang tax rate, because based on the analysis, simulation that you made, ito ang mangyayari sa revenue, pero sa assumption, ganitong mangyayari. So nag-agree na, pero pagdating dun sa when they talk with each other among legislators, nagbabago siya, because they get to influence, to convince each other ano ba dapat, and those factor ng vested interest, whether it's in their own interest or other people's interest, other groups' interest. So nagfa-factor in siya doon that you are not part of that conversation, kasi sila lang yung nagde-decide. The decision-making process na sila lang. That's frustrating, and pag yung result nung policy na napag-agreehan nila, you get to be disappointed kasi hindi nasunod yung pinag-usapan nyo. But then that really happens kasi hindi lang naman yung principal mo yung side dun sa policy, marami sila. At talagang ganun ang policy making and democracy. So ganun ang, merong trade-off lagi in
Right.
anything that we do. So somehow you get to learn how to deal with it. May question kanina si Ma'am Office Templo, how do you deal with it? So what we do now is we present policy options that we incorporate yung political economy aspect ng bawat option. Para so yung political economy, we present both yung impact doon sa the one who controls the wealth and the one who are, the people who are vulnerable because of that policy. So palaging ganun ang nilalagay namin para nakikita na nung legislator, nung policy maker kung ano ang pag itong decision na gawin niya. So, but it always happens. It would always happen. Hindi talaga siyang mawawala. So, dapat you are strong to take these kinds of, challenges, experiences in the workplace. Laging merong ganun in policy making. So, for those who would like to join the Congress, sasabihin ko sa inyo, merong ganun, dapat prepared ka to take on these kinds of challenges na hindi masusunod lahat mo. And then, yung highs, masaya pag sinunod nila. May mga policies naman na easy to do, mag-agree lahat, so masaya ka. So okay yung ganun. But doon ka ma-frustrate pag doon mga policies na hindi, na medyo may malalaking vested interest na talagang powerful enough to convince, to shape the policy of the country. And that's, we are always talking about it. There are powerful people in the country, in the business sector, in the political arena, na talagang sila ang nag-shape ng policy, and that's our challenge. Paano natin to influence yung decision making process na yan. And then so my pieces of advice to young people who are currently taking economics in college and who are economists also, I think you should prepare to take compromises kasi hindi naman talaga this, as what has been discussed, as said earlier, we do not live in an ideal world. Talagang hindi siya perfect. So we should be able to take compromises. Kung ito yung sa tingin natin yung pinaka-ideal na option, what is the next best option? And then what is the third best option? Laging ganun. So dapat prepared tayo sa ganun. At least meron tayong na-achieve step. So along the way, meron tayong na-achieve, and somehow cumulatively, pag naipon lahat, we would be able to achieve what we are dreaming of. And then, do not let setbacks disappoint you. Kailangan matatag tayo. Hindi pwedeng na-frustrate ka, mag-resign ka, lipat ka na lang sa iba. It doesn't work that way. Hindi mo ma-achieve yung objective mo. Why you in government? You work in government because you want to serve the people, and the people includes you. Ikaw, tayo, kasi tayo, we live we share the same environment. Yung transportation, public utilities, tayo apektado at nakikinabang. Kaya dapat yung ating job that we do should be able to contribute kahit step by step towards achieving what we are trying to achieve, yung pinaka-idea. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's very important. Again, ang high pa din is you are doing something that makes a difference. You're doing something, and the high is that when you see something that will make a difference is adopted or is implemented. And I can imagine how satisfying that must be. I can also imagine how frustrating it must be also when they don't want to listen. And but I think the takeaway is important, that you have to manage your expectations, and this should not derail the basic objective, which is to serve, which is to make a difference. And that these setbacks there will always be setbacks, and that you must manage these setbacks the way that you manage most things in life. That it's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to be frustrated, but it should not stop you from doing what you think is correct. And as Merwin had said, you just don't quit just because. All right, about si Juvie, naku, I can imagine madaming kwento si Juvie. Minsan magkakape tayo, Juvie, papakwento ko kasi I'm kidding. Juvie, what's your perspective on this? What are the highs and the lows of working for government?
I agree with, I don't want to repeat whatever everyone else said, no, because I agree with what they've said. Although for me, that's really not a low, it's more of a challenge. And because siguro Merwin and I have been exposed more often to legislators, to politicians, the challenge and the frustration would come from dealing with vested interests that would, of course, be coming from some politicians na. So that would be the challenge. And it has been a challenge for me because I'm into public policy, tax policy for more than a decade. So I would not be able to continue this long in the same work, in the same office, if the benefits does not outweigh that kind of frustration or challenge. And what would be the benefit? As what everyone said, it's really when you see and you feel the change that you have affected when you help make a policy by the people. If you do not see it, then there's nothing of value of what you're doing, no. Pero pag nakita mo, kasi taxation changes behavior eh. So and again, everyone, kahit hindi ka nagbabayad ng tax, naapektuhan ka kasi maaaring nakikinabang ka din doon sa pondo ng gobyerno na kinukuha natin mula doon sa pangunahing source ng ating resources ng government, no? So because of that, you will be able to continue, but it just a warning, of course, to all others who would want to try the government. You would need a lot of patience, no? And as you grow older, siguro si Mr. Jonathan, balde-balding pasensya na ang naipon niya sa pagtatrabaho sa gobyerno, kasi talagang you need a lot of patience and fortitude. Sabi nga ni Merwin, wag kang mag-resign, pero may caveat ako dyan kasi hindi ko nila sasabihin kasi dapat positive tayo. Wag kang basta, don't just quit, no? Try something, try to find a compromise. That's one of the skills that you'll actually learn if you're in the government. You cannot just pose yourself as someone who knows a lot, who knows better, who's the best in this type of subject matter. That will not work. You have to learn how to compromise and make the best compromise still aligned with your principles and the economic principles that you've learned and you've gained over the years, of course. So those things you have to develop. Soft skills, hindi lang yung technical skills. You learn how to deal, how to talk to policymakers and legislators. That's how you do it. You sit down and, you know, one of the things that my old mentor, I learned from her was that when she said, I heard her say, she's really brilliant, but I heard her say this, you know, working in the government is a humbling experience. And at that time, I don't understand. I really did not understand that because I was just in my second year in government. Tapos sabi ko, bakit ang galing-galing nito? Ba't niya sinasabi it's a humbling experience? And then as you go along, and based on your experience, it really is, no? You get to know that you don't really know a lot. So sabi nga natin, it's a continuous learning environment. So don't assume that you know better or you know a lot. Yes, you do stakeholder analysis. Yes, you talk to people because that's also how you learn.
Right. Thank you. That's very insightful as well. And it's just na pick up ko is that the challenge is also, or the low point is also the high point, because you learn to deal with these low points, and that by itself is a skill, and that's something that no one can take away from you. Once you've learned it, it's something that you will always use, and especially if you continue to work in government. Thank you so much to all of the panelists. It's been a very interesting and enlightening discussion. Maraming salamat din sa lahat. Unfortunately, wala na tayong oras. Actually, sumobra na tayo sa oras. Kasi nga ang ganda ng discussion. Salamat sa lahat ng mga nagpadala ng kanilang mga tanong, sa lahat ng mga participants, sa organizers. Salamat uli kay Juvie, kay Jonathan, kay Leo, at saka kay Merwin. Maraming salamat. So unfortunately, that's all that we have for today. I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope you did as well. I hope to see the four of you at some point in the future, maybe if you come visit Los Baños, because I'm based here. If not, maybe I'll see you in Manila. Maraming salamat again kay Yusek Dokoy Kapuno for organizing this, and to PES at sa lahat ng organizers. Thank you so much. I guess that's it. I'll see all of you at some point. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.